Welcome to Board Ghost, a story broadcast with games as the engine.
If living is a highway, then heaven is a bus stop. Been waiting for a minute there, or has it been forever? 'Cause dying don't agree with me, no.
We believe you're out there, hungry for stories for shared experience. We can't see you, can't hear you, yet we will play for you. This night's offering is For the Queen. To learn how we play For the Queen, check out our For the Queen Rules Primer, which won't be up around the same time as this episode, as we're going to wait till this game is published to put out a primer. So For the Queen is designed by Alex Roberts. It's going to be published by Evil Hat Games, and you should go keep an eye on it. Go to our website where we'll have links to it, and also listen to the end of this episode and possibly the next one where we will put some of our interview from a chat we had with Alex at the back of these, talking about the design of this game and her as a designer, and have her open up the world of games to you. So go check that out. Also, if you want to help us in making the show, go to our Patreon at patreon.com/boardghost, where you can get access to episode art, episodes early as we edit them, and generally kind of help us figure out what we're going to play next. And and at the highest tiers, some how to play videos, which we don't do many. We just do sort of not instructionals. We do sort of educationals, but those are instructionals. So if you want to really learn how to play a game, that's the way to do it. The end. Our humble players, myself, John Holt, with me.
Ken Breeze.
Tim Rodriguez.
Hi, I'm Zelma.
Two heavy hitters. Back in action.
Friends of the show.
Am I a heavy hitter now?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Cool.
It's official.
Welcome.
All right.
For the Queen is a game that we will learn about, I think, as we read these little instructional cards. So it actually lays the whole game out for you as you play. So I'm going to pass this deck around. I'll read the card, take it away, pass it to you.
Yep.
So the first card, go around the table clockwise, taking turns reading these cards aloud.
The land you live in has been at war for as long as any of you have been alive.
The Queen has decided to undertake a long and perilous journey to broker an alliance with a distant power.
The Queen has chosen all of you and no one else to be her retinue and accompany her on this journey.
She chose you because she knows that you love her.
You are welcome to look through the Queen cards for inspiration. If there is one that seems right for the group, place it on the table to inspire your story.
Place the X card somewhere everyone can easily reach it.
If you encounter a card or an answer that you don't want to be included in the game, tap the X card. That content is removed from the game.
You can also pass on your turn. To do so, give the prompt card you drew to the next player and say, "I'd like to hear your answer to this question."
Continue answering, passing, and Xing questions until the Queen is under attack card is drawn.
Each player should answer that question in turn. Then the game is over.
All
Can you
right.
describe this Queen for us?
So she's seated on a throne. She's got a very elegant dress that seems to be quite tight around the knees, and the dress is very important. Quite tight around the knees, and then kind of mermaids out. And she's seated, looking directly at the viewer, and she is backlit very heavily, so you can't see any of her features. She seems to have long hair or a cloak that's sort of flowing around her shoulders, and a crown with a very bright jewel right in the center of her forehead. She seems a little sinister, but we love her.
What do you do to disappoint the Queen on this journey? I am designated to hunt. Some days in, find food. The Queen requests meat, flesh, good flesh. I found a deer, but it was a doe with fawns. It is not appropriate to kill the doe for food. And I hesitated and did not return with meat. I found food, but
Not the flesh.
it was not the flesh.
You saw the Queen do something terrible to keep the retinue safe. What was it? Did you come to respect her more or less afterwards? We were all sleeping. We were approaching an area that was known for being very thick with bandits and road thieves and what have you. Because I sleep right near her, she wasn't quite able to sneak out without me seeing. I very carefully followed her. She met a man in the woods. He looked a bit seedy. She gave him a piece of the royal jewelry, some very important historical jewels. She gave him a ring, like, completely irreplaceable. There's said to be magic attached to it in legend. Who knows if that's actually true, but she just gave it to this man. I couldn't understand it, but I also didn't want to be caught, and I ran back and I pretended to be asleep. The next day, as we passed through this narrow passageway where there were said to be all these bandits, the bandits let us pass by. And I think I actually came to respect her more, though I am a little worried about that ring being in the wrong hands.
There's a part of you that does not want peace in this land. Why are you attached to the war? I book passage. I am the one who knows these roads, who knows these ways, and I smuggle so much between these countries. And as long as there are these barriers and these checkpoints and these places that make it hard for goods to travel freely, I'm going to continue to enrich myself. As much as there is hardship that I see on both sides, I really do love having a heavy purse.
What part of this journey will be the most difficult? How do you pull the rest of the retinue through it? When we have been drinking together one night, things have been going well. The queen is safe, asleep, and we get into a boasting contest about who loves the queen the most. Words are said, feelings are hurt, oaths taken, it's even schism in the group. My character is this farmer, yeoman. He has a deep love for the queen, a deep respect and fear of the gem that is upon her head and the orb that is in her throne. This idea that this ring has been given away does not sit well. The way that I try and pull everyone through it is to subvert my own love for her. Be like, I was the cause of this wound, and that I would go, I think, to everyone individually and try and mend this by taking whatever onto myself.
I want to hear your answer to this one.
The queen touched you once. Only once. What about the memory of that will stay with you forever? Oh, my heart. As her favorite lady in waiting, the only lady in waiting brought with her on this journey, I do spend a lot of time with the queen. There's lots of layers between us, not just the physical petticoats and embroidery and gloves and quilting, but also the layers of, I'm nobility myself, but there's a great power difference between a noble woman and a queen of a land. Never has that distance been broached, except for once. It was a difficult evening. She had been in meetings all day. She was being bullied, I suppose, by the council again for not marrying, refusing to give up her power or dilute her power by marrying. She was furious, just raging. Sparks seemed to, I don't know if I imagined it, but it just absolutely furious that they would even bring this up. And all the other ladies in waiting were terrified, and I was a little scared myself. She finally screamed at all of us to leave her alone. I, of course, being one of the ladies in waiting, left as well. Just as I was about to leave, she said, "No, you stay." She took hold of my elbow with her hand, and she wasn't wearing a glove, and my sleeves were short that day. It was a momentary contact that seemed to bridge across the gap of class, the strictures of society. She held my elbow and we looked in each other's eyes. It was a true touch, even in the eye contact. And then I just sat with her for the night and we didn't speak.
When did you know you would never forgive the Queen, and why? The first time that I was brought to private audience with the Queen, the first task I was ever given was the first time I was asked to kill someone. It was a test, and I passed it. Little did I know that my brother had also been given the same task against me. I passed the test, my brother did not. That was not the last time the Queen asked me to spill blood.
What is something you do for the royal family that has prepared you well for this journey? My character as a farmer is a yeoman, right? Like he owns his own land, right? And tills his own land. My character is the reason we're hidden on this journey, where we are transporting my crop across the land through, thankfully, these checkpoints that our master smuggler is able to get us through. That, I think, is that they use my land as like a secret safe house. And my family has like served them the throne, served the orb for, generations. The Queen, of course, when she comes, is the avatar of all those things that I've been prepared to just be myself, to be like unremarkable farmer. But in truth, I'm a secret servant of the Queen.
The Queen is responsible for the death of someone you love. Who? What happened? My mother was called to the Queen's court at one point. I'm not there most of the time. I'm not entirely sure of all the details, but I've heard rumors. I know that I never saw her again. It is said that blood feeds her magic. Whether that's true or not, I could not tell. Honestly, it could be just some mission. She's gone away. Perhaps exiled. Perhaps sent to her death. Perhaps married off in somewhere nice. But I don't know. I can't know. And I dare not ask.
What makes the Queen beautiful in your eyes? I'm always the gay one. I'm not mad about it. There are rumors that she's actually 300 years old and that without her magic, she would be a decrepit old crone. That doesn't matter to me because her eyes would still be the same. And that little smile she gets in the corner of her mouth would still be the same, even if she were nearly dust. It's her intelligence, it's her cunning that makes her beautiful to me.
The Queen lights a fire in you. What is it? I was of a noble house, a vine far from line of hierarchy of attaining any true status. I was the fourth son of the house, twin to my brother. So third or fourth, you make the pick. He said third. He was a few minutes older. That meant drinking and spending the wealth and cavorting, having nothing, no purpose, no edge. The Queen points me forward, gives me direction.
What do you do for the Queen that anyone else can do, and why does she make you do it? I perform rituals in this cult of this Queen or whatever, in this cult of this service of this secret society that I am a part of. Some of that may, in fact, involve blood magic that she could do herself to other people, but I choose to do to myself, provide her with whatever that magical essence is that she is seeking.
The Queen had you punished once. What about the memory of that will stay with you forever? Owing to my position and love for the Queen, a time I failed, of the several times she showed me her face. I have no ability to speak of it. It is all of my dreams, and it is impossible.
What did you bring with you to protect the Queen? So we're pretty incognito. I'm not wearing any of my silks or velvets or embroidery. I'm dressed like a common peasant, which of course means cotton and linens. And of course, I still don't look like I've ever worked a day in my life because I haven't. But I am carrying with me a very heavy bag. In the bag, well, she doesn't think that I know what they are, but they are items of magical significance. And they keep her safe, as well as the rest of the party. They are also why I sleep close to her. She should be near them as much as possible. There are little jars with pickled baby animals, little vials of ancient caked blood, little jars of dirt. Nothing is labeled. Nothing seems to be related to anything else. Little shells, little buttons, strands of hair in intricate knots. But I carry it all with me just in case. And occasionally she's asked for something, and I give her the jar of dirt or the knot of hair or the strange skull of a creature that I've never seen before. And I don't ask what she needs it for. But I presume it's to protect her.
When did you know you were in love with the Queen? I had returned to my chambers after many nights away from home, many nights abroad in the field, many nights visiting ambassadors and people from faraway lands. And I returned exhausted, ragged, and somewhat wounded, and I had to tend to this wound. Standing in my chambers in her shroud was the Queen. I knew why she was there, to see that I returned with the job done. She looked me over, she looked at the blood on my hands, the blood on my clothes, the blood in my hair, and nodded and turned, and the door was open for her and she left. But she acknowledged my worth in that moment. And she acknowledged a job done and done right.
What did you bring with you that endangers the Queen? I brought a certain root that grows on my land and that my family has used for many years to make tea. I save it for special occasions. I'm saving it for when the peace accord is signed, or rather the alliance is signed, we will have a taste of home. Apparently, this root is anathema to the Queen in her current state, which I have no clue, but I'm simply carrying it in my herbs and other sundries.
What do you usually do for the royal family? Why does that make you an unlikely choice for this journey? As I said before, I'm a hunter and a tracker. I am not a kennel master. I'll often run the outdoor diversions. As far as the royal family goes, I sort of count myself an entertainer more than anything else. Not in the way that seems useful for the road like this, not useful for an excursion of this sort.
The Queen knows something about you that no one else does. What is it? I am nobility. This is true. But I am actually nobility of another country. And I was brought here when I was very young as sort of a guest under duress. I've been taken very good care of. It is not the kingdom that we are at war with. It is a small allied nation. I am a guest from a very powerful noble family from another country. But I've been here for so long that no one knows. Or if they do know, then they pretend not to because the Queen wants no one to know.
What brings out the Queen's cruelty? So the Queen, with a smile, refers to me as her cruelty.
Nice.
Oh, amazing.
She has a nice. I've heard she has a nice little smirk that she does.
The corner of her
little
mouth
corner
there.
of her mouth.
I've seen her full smile.
You have seen her full smile.
I've been called out for many reasons, but her true ire has been drawn by slights to her personage when she is not given her due as a woman of power, when she's looked down upon for not being a king, when they look at her form that is of a beautiful young woman, the aged, whether they are queens or kings or other nobles or ambassadors, think her a child. And that's often when I'm called. Quickly.
When was the last time the Queen showed you real kindness? It was after my mother disappeared. I was called to court. I had no idea what to expect. I was offered a role that I had no ability to do, but I learned. I was offered the wealth that I'm not sure I deserved, but it was granted. And I have no more to ask for.
There's a false rumor about you and the Queen back at the royal court. What is it? How did it start? So I already told you about the time the Queen touched me. That was the only truly open, completely sincere moment of contact that has ever taken place between us. But according to the rumors, that is not the only point of contact that has ever taken place. The rumor is that the Queen is in love with me. And it probably started because there have been many times that she has requested my presence late at night. As much as I wish that the rumor were true, I know, even with all of those late nights, that there is no love, not in the way that I feel it, from her direction to me. But I'll take what I can get.
You were summoned to a private meeting with the Queen once. Why did you feel disappointed afterward? I was summoned after many years of duty and service to my secret bond to the small holy room or something like that that's on my people's land. I guess you could call it a church, but not really.
A shrine.
A shrine, yeah. I think that's the better way to think of it. And she appeared there once to me as I was making my propriations. She told me what would need to happen to bring this alliance that she sought to fruition, and told me of my role in it. Everything. She laid it all out for me. I have no illusions. And as she disappeared, I continued to grasp onto this experience that I had had. Like, even as she was disappearing, I was closing my eyes and thinking about the shroud and about the gem, about the way her voice sounded, about the smell of the wax and the different burning materials that were around us. And I realized that this person that I served was no god. They sought an alliance. Why? It seemed to be counterintuitive to me. It seemed to be too human. It seemed to me to betray the ideal of the throne.
What do you do that pleases the Queen on this journey?
You started by disappointing her.
That's right. It's not all bad. After learning a new understanding of sorrow, after I'd failed her before, no animals survived. I brought everything that I could carry. Sustainability of the wildlife be damned. If my Queen wanted flesh, she would have it. Fawns, does, whatever.
You are considered ugly by almost everyone you meet. How does the Queen make you question that perception? Well, I mean, look at her. For some reason, I'm the one that she chose to take into her bed.
When was the last time the Queen hurt you? There was a time when I was unknowingly set out to fail. That the Queen, I had made some slight to her. There was something wrong that I could not perceive, But my next mission was a suicide mission. And as I slipped into the tent of a courtier, one of the women of a traveling king who had come to pay fealty to our queen, a woman who had batted her eyes at our queen and smiled at her unbecomingly and laughed with the king at her. As I slipped into her tent, instead of being met with silks, I was met with swords. I escaped with more than a few scars, but my life.
Did you succeed? Did you kill her?
I was the only one to escape that tent.
Ah.
You arranged for the queen to be ambushed on this journey. What did they offer you? I have arranged for this ambush to happen as we are nearing our destination, perhaps. They offered me the life of the queen, that like the other retainers would be slain and that I would be able to escape with the queen. It was sort of this bargain that this mission would fail. I've probably been in contact with the place that we're going to. It's been set up with them to take care of this business. The reason, A, he wants to see her unleashed, and B, he wants her to have no other option but to rely as heavily as possible on her own power.
The queen gave you a compliment once. What was it, and why have her words stayed with you? It was my first success in her court. I arranged an outing one of the first times. She had arranged for her younger brother to go learn the hunt. He's a child. He has no ability to draw a bow, to wield a spear. But I took him and I helped him feel strong, and I helped him understand what he could do. Apparently he spoke well of me. She thanked me and said that I had done her a great kindness and that she was glad that she had taken me on.
Who is this distant power you are traveling to, and why do they make you uneasy? We're going to a kingdom that is further south and a little bit to the east. It's a different ocean and a different kinds of forests, different kinds of fields, different kinds of mountains, different kinds of animals. Everything is different in this new place, and as we cross the borders and the terrain changes, even the air feels different. It feels lighter. It doesn't feel heavy with magic the way it does back home. The sun seems too bright, and the colors are too sharp. Everything just feels like a sunburn. The people are friendly, but in a way that is extremely off-putting, suspicious. I don't understand how a kingdom can run like this.
You saved the queen's life once. How? There have been many assassination attempts against our queen. She's well guarded. I've been sent out often preemptively to deal with potential problems. But there was one time where the knives got close. The queen was not in her seat of power. She was not in her throne room. She was traveling between some outer land, some farmland perhaps, on the edge of the kingdom. Thankfully, I happened to be passing, it was Kismet, her sort of solo passage with few guardsmen, and my own night travels crossed paths. And I looked across the tree, right at the tree across the road. From the branches I stood looking down on the queen as she passed. And there I saw the flash of another blade. and mine sung true, and the queen knew not of the danger she was in.
The queen trusts you, but no one else in the royal court does. Why? The royal court knew my mother. There is a strong, inheritance of, habit. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, you have similar gestures and.
Yeah, but you are bad in the same ways, right? Like you
Oh.
So
inherited
you
that.
are, you're unclean or shamed.
Right.
Your mother's son.
Yeah. The royal court sees me as my mother's son. I don't know what that means, but I have found no friends there.
You suspect this journey isn't just about diplomatic negotiations. What else do you believe is going on and why? That bag that I'm carrying is awfully heavy. I think that if she could get close enough, my queen, the woman I know, could stage a coup in an instant. Win over the hearts of an entire court in a second. Maybe she wouldn't even need my bag, but I have it here.
You have a personal connection to the land you're currently traveling through. What makes you want to stay and why don't you? I'm a nobleman,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a smuggler,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really an assassin.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In this land, I'm a smuggler more than anything else. That's the persona, the public face that I have. I have a family here. My wife and my children live in this land. I met a young woman. She was working at a milliner's when I was there to kill one of their guests.
Sweet story.
And we hit it off, you know.
Does she know you're a noble?
Or an assassin.
Or
She knows that
Smuggler?
She knows that I move goods and I keep goods beneath the house,
Mm-hmm.
and that I need to travel regularly, but that I keep her and my daughter well fed, especially with a new little one on the way.
What makes the queen ugly in your eyes? We're getting to this root that my character doesn't think the queen is right for the throne. That there's something else that this character seems to be worshiping. And it seems that the queen is, again, more the avatar of this power. The throne, the crown, the orb. Ugly is an interesting one because I don't think my character finds her physically ugly or physically repulsive or anything like that. I think that what's making the queen ugly to my character is she happens to not be hardcore enough, raise the dead, let's do this, let's win this, let's get there. Her policies are ugly to me.
There is someone else in this retinue you love besides the queen.
Yes!
How and why are you keeping it a secret? I'm head over heels in love with the handmaiden, but I'm some up-jumped nobody, and I could never. I'll write letters that I keep in a secret diary.
oh, my heart.
I keep that tucked away against my breast at all times, because if anyone were to ever to find it, I can't even imagine the consequences. So I keep my love quiet, because on my face I only love my queen.
Why are some others at the royal court jealous of your relationship with the queen? I'm ugly, according to them, and yet I'm the favorite. I'm the one that she picked. No one seems to see any particular skills or talents or wit or charm or anything special about me. I'm sure there are good things about me, like the queen picked me, and she's so beautiful, she wouldn't pick someone who was useless and hideous, so there must be something to me. But others can't seem to see it, so it makes sense that they would be jealous, but that's their problem.
What brings out the queen's kindness?
Oh,
The queen is quick to call on me, so I'm constantly watching her moods to see when I may be called to action. because I got a lot going on in life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so much.
wow.
So much.
She seems to bestow her kindness, which is mostly her attentions, to those who focus themselves on her. If you are giving yourself over, if you're burning yourself on the pyre of your desire and your belief in her, then she is most likely to bestow a kindness upon you. That is when I've been seeing her at her most obsequious.
Mm.
Why do you think the queen trusts you enough to bring you on this journey? The easy answer is like, oh, secret society, been serving the throne, been serving the queen forever. And there's this thing I think that we're all dancing around maybe a little bit of, which is the age of the queen. There was this rumor about how old she is. And I think she is quite old. I think she's been ruling for a century, maybe longer. I mean, as long as we can remember, this kingdom has been at war and this queen has been on the throne. So why do I think the queen trusts me enough to bring me on this journey? Especially since I'm betraying her. Especially since I am not happy with her policies. I feel like the way that the queen was earlier in my lifetime was different. And that tells me that this person might be someone else. Why do you think the queen trusts you enough to bring you on this journey? Because she doesn't know me well enough to bring me on this journey. My blind love for the throne and for the queen, this person, whoever this is, has begun to use.
How does the queen remind you of her status while on the journey?
Oof.
I am not often tasked with skills of travel. Some of my companions are far more able and knowledgeable than I in terms of what must be done. And so I am an ersatz person in waiting at many times, waiting nearby at my queen's beck and call in sight of my loves. And I must stand there. I know my place.
What promise did the queen make to you before this journey? Do you think she'll keep it? I don't know if she thought this was something I wanted, but she said that she promised that she would find me a match and marry me off very, very well, that I would have lots of land if we made it through this journey. I hope she doesn't keep it.
The queen sometimes shows interest in your personal life. How do you respond to that? I am the queen's cruelty. I am an expression of one of her primal instincts. I am a weapon, a tool. And she wants to know that I'm kept sharp, that I have few distractions, that I keep to the mission. The few times that she speaks to me to not send me out or to confirm my success, it's a pleasant and polite curiosity. She's still asking from a place of a position of power. She's politely demanding these answers of me. I know well enough to know that she can taste a full lie, so I have to skirt and dance around my truths.
Ooh.
So when I respond, I tell fractional truths and give names to things that are other names, but I believe them to myself when I'm asked about where I go and where I stay, when I go off to another kingdom to work, if I have any other places where I rest. If I'm referring to my home, I have a word I use for that, so that I believe in my heart is this place, but that she, I hope, will never learn. I hide all that I can from her.
You think of someone in this retinue as the queen's favorite. Who and what makes you think this? I think the easy answer would be the handmaiden, would be the queen's favorite. But I think the story that we've been telling actually leads us somewhere else. Who is the queen's favorite? The handmaiden is obviously the prized companion. I think the cruelty seems to be part of the queen. Part of me feels like the cruelty, as you have said, is an extension of the queen, almost maybe even magically or spiritually, like you are empowered by the queen. And so that makes you part of her power. For me, I actually look to the huntsman as who is the queen's favorite.
Hmm.
And the reason is why is this huntsman here? This doesn't make any sense to me in some ways. Sure. The meat and the flesh, our queen craves flesh and blood. Like that, those are clear things.
Gotta get the blood.
But the queen
She's
is
anemic.
so
It's fine. It's not that big a
the
deal.
queen is so dismissive and so cruel to the huntsman in a way that she definitely is not cruel to the handmaiden, in a way that she's definitely not cruel to her literal cruelty, like her own, that part of herself given to someone else. So who are you? And why do I think that she is, you are her favorite? I think that you're her favorite because you're her son.
You are considered beautiful by almost everyone you meet. How does the queen make you question that perception? At one point in time, she offered me the answer to any question I desired. I asked if I could be loved. She looked at me. She said no. And yet I love you.
The queen is under attack. Do you defend her? Heck, yes, I do.
How? Do you want to
Hell
describe
yes.
what's happening?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And we'll each answer.
So we are ambushed,
Of course.
and I am at the queen's right hand. I reach into the bag that I have of hers, and I pull out the largest jar, and it looks like it contains a storm, or ink. It hasn't stopped moving. Sometimes she has me put it on the ground next to us while we sleep, and I watch the swirls of what looks like lightning and stars inside this bottle move, and it never settles the entire night, and it keeps me awake those nights. And I take that jar out, and I look at her, and she doesn't stop me, so I throw it on the ground, and it shatters, and a storm emerges, just blossoms in the sky, and it goes as far as the eye can see and plunges the world into darkness, and it feels a bit more like home.
The attack begins, and I recognize the blades, and I recognize the small motions of the farmer, the glances past, and I watch the darkness fall, and I step sideways off the path into the woods, and stand and watch it all happen.
I sit on the buckboard still. I knew this was coming, and I also just watch, but without leaving. I stay to watch for my chance to get away with the queen.
I hear a voice in my head directing me where to fire. I fire one arrow, and an assailant falls. I fire another arrow. The farmer falls. I fire one more arrow, and the queen falls. I hear in my head, "You can go." And I return to the tent, and I don't know what to do.
We interrupt our story here, and we'll return again in our next communique. Stick around. We're going to play some of our interview with Alex Roberts. I was one of your players, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho and on Instagram at board_ghost. Ken, where can people find you?
Board Ghost, find me, Ken Breeze, on Twitter at Berlingsbeard, BERLINGS, my website of the same name.
My name's Tim Rodriguez. You can find me on Twitter at Dice Food Lodging or on the interwebs at GalileoGames.com.
I am still Zelma, and you can find me at Z for Zelma on Twitter and Instagram. I'm still really terrible at using Twitter, but maybe talk to me sometime. And maybe I'll use Twitter more. You can also find me at my professional website, kelseyherks.com, which is my playwriting name.
All right. And if there's time, if this is up in time, we'll promote. You have a show coming up.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. So I'm going to be in a play that you might have heard of. It's called Romeo and Juliet. And I'm going to be playing Juliet, which is awesome. And it is the week of Valentine's Day. So if you are the sort of cool person that likes to see lots of death on Valentine's Day, then sorry, spoiler alert, then you should come see it. It's the 11th, the 12th, and the 14th, which is a Monday, a Tuesday, and a Thursday. And you can get tickets for that on horsetrade.info/Crane Theater, I think. Just look for Crane Theater, KRAINE. Please come see it. We're working really hard, and there's some really beautiful stuff happening.
Thank you so much again, Alex, for joining us. On Board Ghost, we're so interested, we're so focused on getting new games out to people who have not played them before, to introduce new folks to the community of games that are out there, the awesome work that's being done.
We don't really build ourselves as an instructional podcast. We play, hopefully, so that people can see you can just play and be as weird as you want. Even doing interviews is sort of new and interesting for us. Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Alex Roberts. I'm a writer and game designer and doer of many other things that I get a chance to. You may know me from Starcrossed, which is the first game that I put out with Bully Pulpit Games. It's a 2-player game of Forbidden Love. Also coming out this year is For the Queen, which is a game about love and honor and loyalty and betrayal and all the fun drama that implies. It's a completely card prompt based storytelling game where you start with nothing and just go. If your favorite parts of gaming are the world building and the character building, this game is for you. I've also kind of contributed to a lot of other people's games. Dialect comes to mind, the new supplement to Misspent Youth, my piece in that's something I'm really proud of. Yeah, just piles and piles of things that I have been excited to be a part of. I get to do speaking sometimes. I was guest of honor at Rubicon this year in Finland. I was an industry insider, featured presenter at Gen Con a few years back. I like to talk about design. I like to talk about not designing and other ways of making games. And people always pull me in to talk about sex and romance and RPGs too, because that seems to be a bit of a specialty. I also do a podcast on the One Shot Network that is all about interviewing wonderful, fascinating folks in the role-playing world.
The first time we interview someone, it's going to be someone who has got closer to 100 interviews and fantastic interviews too, of people in this world. It was great research to listen to a show about interviewing.
And I know that as we were sort of thinking about what's been going on with you recently, you mentioned Starcross, of course. Congratulations on getting it on the Nebula Award reading list.
What's really wonderful is that there is like a games portion of the Nebula reading list this year, which is awesome. And there are some really, really incredible games on there, like Twain by Jay Lee jumps to mind, a bunch of games by like Jian Shim, Dialect, which I mentioned is on there. Like there's all kinds of games that maybe you don't even necessarily think of like fantasy and sci-fi, but they're about speculating. They're about building a world that doesn't exist. The fact that people who aren't necessarily exposed to a lot of games will be, and that it's mostly very kind of out there independent games is really, really exciting to me. So yeah, the whole list is worth checking out.
So to jump back to the past, when did you start discovering story games or even RPGs? What was that transition and that awakening for you?
This is such a sweet story. I played what I decided was Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, just like based on what I saw on TV. I was like, yeah, so like one person sits there and kind of says what's happening and everyone else says what their character does. Cool. I can do this. I'm 12. So I did that for many years. And then when I was in high school, I met some boys who had the actual books and they played actual D&D. So I played 3.5 when I was in high school, and like, whatever, we rarely got past character creation, but it was fun. By the time I was in university, 4th edition was the thing. By then I actually got to play the game, like past character creation. And I was like, I don't know, this is like really not for me. But I kept trying to play it, and I was like, yeah, and I guess I didn't really like 3.5 either. I just liked hanging out with my friends. And so I had a beer with a friend of mine. And I knew that he was kind of, into role-playing games. And I said, yeah, this is my buddy Patrick. I said, yeah, Patrick, I'm just not that into role-playing games. I thought that I was, but I have played a lot of D&D now. And I'm not, so yeah, oh well. And he was like, oh, Alex. He told me about the burning wheel. That was like, what? And then he told me about Fiasco and Dread and My Life with Master and Kagamatsu, all this stuff that was like sitting on his shelf, mostly unplayed, and that he was really excited about, and that consequently I was extremely excited about. So he started this kind of like a book club where about once a month, whoever could make it could make it. We would play a game, and it would be one that we hadn't played before. And so over the space of about a year or two, I got to play all the ones I just mentioned and more. Like I played Shock, social science fiction as well. A ton of stuff that I would never have like found on my own. That was my whole sort of introduction to that stuff. The first one too. The first one was Fiasco. And what was funny about that first meeting was that my buddy Patrick couldn't even make it. And it was like on the outskirts of town. So I was like on the bus. I'm like, whatever, 20 or something. On the bus, the middle of nowhere. It's completely dark. And I'm like, maybe this is a bad idea. But I went and did it anyway. So I played Fiasco with two guys who I didn't know. It's such an, like, this eye-opening, like, wow, holy shit, games are amazing, actually. Turns out I actually love RPGs.
It sounds like you're wanting to play games and indie games from pretty early stage in your development. I'm always interested in like what are the preconceptions people have that would preclude them from doing this? What are the preconceptions that we have that are either driving us towards or away from these experiences? And do you remember before you had all these awesome gaming experiences? I mean, were there any preconceptions that you can remember having?
There was a couple of things. I mean, one, I seemed to have this indomitable preconception that I would enjoy it, that it was fun, and that it was fun for me. And that idea was so strong that it could not even be destroyed by repeated attempts to play the game and not actually find it that fun. So so I just convinced myself of this very early on. I think the other thing is that I had done a little bit of improv in high school and never as much of it as I wanted. We had like this very short-lived improv club that I really, really liked. Jumping right into Fiasco, there were probably things there that I found pretty familiar and comforting and enjoyable. I think it helps that I had a conversation with someone who I knew really well and trusted about a bunch of games that all sounded really cool and that he was really excited about. And so it wasn't like I just answered an ad in the paper, just signed up for some random thing, and that led me to go to some stranger's house in the middle of the night. I think for the most part, like if you want people to join your gaming group, or if you want to start a gaming group and have lots of different people be a part of it, you really do have to do like a lot of face-to-face stuff. And not just face-to-face as in come to my house and play a game, but like let's just hang out and do something that may or may not be a game, or that decidedly isn't. No pressure whatsoever.
Right.
And then once you get to know these people and we just kind of talk about it, then you'll be excited for it. People really know that if they go to play a game, that game might be 2 to 6 hours. When I tell people that For the Queen and Starcross both play in like 2 hours or sometimes less, that's very short. No, that's actually really, really long compared to like a lot of like leisure activities that you are going to be sort of fully focused on, like take a break. But still, I think people are worried about, okay, I'm going to get there, I'm going to sit down, I'm not going to like it, and then that's my whole night. Like that's it. Maybe you're even trying to tap people into a campaign. You know, there's so much like weird obligation feelings that come out with a campaign too, right? So having that initial conversation that's just, hey, we're just talking about this cool thing, and then making sure that there's some sort of opportunity for them to either express or rescind interest before it's like, come and play this game with me or don't.
Like once you're in the world of like knowing what D&D is or RPGs, there's this other layer, this like next sort of level that is the LARP,
Ah, yeah.
right? If you know D&D and you play it, like I mean, I know that there are in-jokes and like memes about LARPing that are just part of that tabletop role-playing culture, and it sort of like sets LARP apart. When were you introduced into that type of story gaming, and were there preconceptions or sort of notions that you were able to skirt or had to burst through to get there? When did that world open up for you?
It was also something that I had always wanted to try, but never had the opportunity to go out in the woods and make a costume and make that kind of level of investment. When I really started learning about LARP, it was through learning about people in this independent publishing world talk about their experiences with LARP in the Nordic countries, reading blog posts from people like Vincent Baker or Emily Care-Boss, talking about this amazing, really cool stuff that they were doing. I had more of that than I did, mean jokes about a lightning bolt, etc. That was advantageous. And I was more inclined to trust a blog post from these designers I really admire than I did a mean video. I got to hear so much about that and these really awesome, positive admiration things that when the opportunity did come up for me to LARP, and it came up in the most ridiculous way. I was doing a lot of swing dance at the time, and then I went to this thing called the ecstatic dance that some friends of mine brought me to, which is like this, it's a super fun thing that you can do at a yoga studio near you. And I met some people there who were really cool and fun, added them on Facebook, and they were like, oh, hey, come to this crystal bowl healing sound journey thing with me. And I was like, oh, maybe. But I looked at their events that they were hosting, and they were also hosting a LARP. And so I was like, oh, okay, can I like for sure go to that though? And so I got to go to my first LARP, which turned out it was also a Jason Morningstar joint. My first story game and my first LARP was, I think it was like a LARP adaptation of like a card game that he'd made and then just like put out there for free called We Are Here to See the Wizard Cormaker. Made a great LARP. It was super fun. I think it helped that I was playing with a bunch of other people who are really new. I don't think it was his first LARP that he'd ever run, but it was one of his first LARPs. So that was how I started LARPing. And then that guy my buddy Kevin, just started running LARPs again, almost every month, like really consistently facilitating just new stuff. There was stuff online, but he got LARPs from the Factory, which is a really great book full of short scenario LARPs, mostly from Northern Europe. Yeah, so he just started running them and it was super fun. And I did that pretty regularly. And then I went to Dreamation. Oh my gosh, at Dreamation, I did a bit of gaming. I did a ton of LARPing. It was my first time LARPing outside of that really like small group. And I met so many sweet people who I'm still like good pals with today, who have been guests on Backstory. So yeah, that's when my world really like opened up.
We've sort of been talking about you being introduced and having these touchstones, preconceptions. Now it's obvious things have flipped to some degree, right? You have all this knowledge, you have all this experience, you have gone on this journey. How are you now introducing people to these worlds?
Something that I do that's really important to me is just talk about how much I love it, regardless of company. I'm trying not to just among nerds talk about my love of LARP, whether I'm meeting people at a party or in a class or whatever that I'm doing, some community thing, just talk about it. A lot of people put this stuff away. And I get why, they got teased or given a hard time for being into what they're into, and that sucks. But I think the more that you just like stand in it and you're like, yeah, I do live action role playing. Like my experience has been that people will be really curious about that. If it's something that you are like clearly not ashamed of and that you are actually super stoked on and that it seems to be giving you a lot of joy, people often want to know more. And then you're having those kinds of conversations like I was talking about earlier that aren't, hey, come and LARP with me. And then you have to say yes or no. And if you're at all not sure, you're going to say no or whatever. But it's just, hey, like, here's a cool thing that I do. And then if they are interested, you can say, great, we'll play something sometime. And then have a couple of low prep, low player count, low time, low investment games on hand and play. And have them play with other people who are not experienced. Like, don't drop them into your campaign of other people who've been playing with you for 25 years. I think that can be really, really intimidating. I think it's a lot more fun when you just have a bunch of people who want to give it a shot. And if they have fun, that's cool. And if they don't, then they've had a new experience. But in my experience, they always have fun. They always love it.
Is within those conversations, is there language or jargon that you try to avoid, like to keep it open? I guess from experience, like there have been times where I've been telling someone about a game experience, and if I say we were playing this LARP and da 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 da, if I just say we're playing this story game, this sort of art experience or whatever, like if you couch it as less jargony, like someone going up and saying Carcossonne is a tile laying game with da 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 da, that's are you going to sell them on it, right? Like, are you using insider language? Like, have you found that there's language that is better, or is it better just kind of be upfront, then just go into the experiences?
Yeah, definitely your experience. Talk about how the game makes you feel. Tell them about the cool thing that happened in the game, and if they are not interested, they'll be like, that's nice. Respect that. And if they are interested, they'll be like, what kind of game are you talking about? And then you get to say things like, what kind of game are you thinking of? Like, I mean, you don't say that exactly, but when, like, I like to just say game, and then
Yeah.
you can figure out pretty quickly if people think that you are talking about a video game about shooting. That's very often what a lot of people think, especially in my experience, older people. I often think that I am making video games, and then they get really excited when it turns out I'm not making video games. And I'm like, no, because it's all about like face-to-face communication, you know? And they're like, yeah. And then they tell you about playing D&D in like the 80s, man. Watch out. This awesome lady at my church the other day, I had mentioned as a game designer many times, and then like after the millionth time she said something about like, you know, one of these days I'll have to tell you about Star Trek Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, excuse me? She was Guinan. Yeah, you just say game and just talk about what happened and how much fun
Yeah.
you had. And if they are interested, then they will ask more. And that's when you can say like, well, it's like a role-playing game. Like, do you know Dungeons and Dragons? It's kind of like that except this. Or you say, well,
Yeah.
it's like a live action game. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever done like improv stuff. It's kind of like that,
Yeah.
but with, you know, with a few more rules. So yeah, you can kind of figure out what their knowledge is and then like scaffold from there. The most important thing is to just speak confidently from your own experience and speak with the actual real joy that the thing gives you.
That's a great segue into talking about your own experience now, specifically moving from that persona, if you will, or place of player to designer, and just that transition. When you design, do you consider the audience like early in the process? Do you have a target experience level of players that you're trying to design for? Like how do you, what is, we want to get into your process a little bit, I think, to understand just how you begin to design a game.
And we can start specifically from For the Queen.
I have like no process. It's just chaos from start to finish. Some games are pretty much done in like a month or two, and some games haunt me for years before finally figuring themselves out. Starcrossed was definitely the latter, but For the Queen was the former. For the Queen was like, I kind of just woke up one morning with the idea and wrote as much of it down as I could, play tested it like 2 or 3 days later, took out half of the game because it was full of nonsense. It's more or less been the same deck of cards since then, with modifications. Working with Evil Hat, I get to work with Karen 12, who's a very good editor, who makes sure that my cards can be read and understood by humans other than me. Is very important. It's certainly been like an editing process, and you know, the illustration process for this game and the design graphically, a lot of care and effort has been put into that. That's all happening, and that's time consuming, but it was something that kind of like, oh, this is sort of an idea. Let's see if it works at all. And then it worked sort of. And then basically just hauled out most of it. The original version of For the Queen had a Jenga tower and about 40 dice. Yeah, it was just complete nonsense. It was the deck of cards, and then it just had a bunch of other nonsense that I dreamed up. But the first playtest was with some really good friends of mine, two of whom play story games all the time, and two of whom are brilliant and amazing and creative, but have often expressed to me that they're very like a bit nervous or a bit anxious around, oh, am I going to be creative enough? You know, I get put on the spot. And that's something like I run into a lot, is people believing that they're not creative enough. And it sucks so bad because they always are. Like, they're often like the most brilliant.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we played it with them and they were great. It was good at bringing out that particular kind of player. And so I was like, okay, sweet. It barely functions, that's fine, but it's doing that one particular thing that I really, really, really want. And wasn't a stated design goal when I sat down to make it. It was something that I found, and it was something that I wanted to keep and keep building on. If I saw more of that, then I was going to keep doing what I was doing. And if that started to wane in any way, I was going to go back to the previous version. Absolutely. And I started playing it with people who were completely unfamiliar, who had never ever played, maybe who I had never even like really talked to, like sort of friends of friends, for whom this was like their totally first introduction to role playing, and they had fun with it. So I was like, okay, sweet. I played it with my dad and my sister. My sister has role played before, but my father had not. he really wanted to like get what it was all about, but like I wasn't going to play Starcrossed with him. So we had not really had the opportunity, but he played that and he got it, instantly understood, and was able to play and really contributed a lot. It was a great game. So I was like, okay, everybody wants the game that they can play with their parents. Come on, like for reals. Shout out to all the people whose parents introduced them to D&D in the first place. That is beautiful. For the rest of us, a lot of us are looking for that experience. As soon as that started happening, I was like, okay, I just want to keep drilling down on making sure that this happens. Everything is just about making that happen. And so as we were making decisions about wording or format or illustration, absolutely anything, it was just about anyone who doesn't think that they can play, how do we communicate to them that they can?
So next is to make Against the Queen, the antithesis that's just really for like the gamers game,
Yeah, the
right?
super intimidating, just like absolute black box of a game. Like you cannot figure it out.
We'll have links and everyone's contact information on the website at boardghost.com. You can attempt to pierce the veil and contact us on Twitter at boardghostworld. Shout out through the ether if you have desires we can fulfill. Tell people about the show. Go onto iTunes, subscribe so you can stay up to date with stuff or whatever listening portal you prefer. Yeah, that's the good stuff. So we will be back next week. And we'd like to thank Pat Couples for our theme song and interlude music. You can find more about Pat at patcouples.tumblr.com or his band's website, hotelsandhighways.com. If you're not alone in the void, share our stories. The more they are consumed, the truer they become.
I don't agree with me.